Hey everyone, welcome to Pencil versus Pixel. I am Caesar, your host, and I am very excited to introduce today's guest, Mr. Jason Blumer. Welcome to the show, Jason.
What's up, Caesar, man? Thanks for having me. I love pencil versus pixel. Did I get that right or did
Yes,
I
sir.
mix them
Yeah.
up?
Awesome. Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
Definitely, definitely. So, a little bit about Jason. He is the Chief Innovation Officer and President of Blumer CPAs, a creative experimental CPA firm exclusively serving the creative and technology professions. He's also founder and CEO of Thrival, a CPA network, and co-host of a couple of podcasts, the Thrivecast, as well as the Businessology show with web designer Dan Mall, where they talk about the art and science of running a creative business. Now, I have Jason on the show today because he has a ton of experience working with creative professionals, and I know that he will provide a lot of information that I know you and I could put into action even today. So, if you're a designer and you're going to jump into freelance or you're planning on starting a company, you've got to listen up. All right, so before we dive in, Jason, pencil or pixel?
Good question. It depends on when you ask me. Our firm is virtual, so we have to be a no paper firm for sure. But I'm really, as a journal and read more, I'm really getting more analog. So I want to start feeling my journal, my leather bound journal, and feeling that hardback book so I can write in it. So different times in my life or different parts of my day, I guess I would be pencil or pixel, but both. Can I say both?
Definitely. I love it. I love the explanation too. And
Cool.
you're talking maybe like a moleskin or something, or
Yeah, well, for the Thrival CPA network I started, we actually created a journal called the Big Ideas Journal and have certain sections. So we had it handmade, in Thailand and hand
wow,
stitched. And so it's pretty nice, but it would be similar to a moleskin type journal probably.
love it, love it. So Jason, tell us a little bit more about yourself. How did you get started, and tell us more about your involvement with designers and tech professionals. What's your story?
Yeah. Well, I guess, yeah, so 4 or 5 years ago, we started serving more and more creative people, designers, web, technology, development, all kind of people. Um, and really that became more and more. And then as a firm, one of our core strategies was to go virtual, which is different for traditional firms. They normally have an office you can go to. And so I thought, well, I want to shut my office down. I don't want an office anymore. And we had a good team and they were okay with going virtual. So, we did it. It took about 3 years to transition the clients and the team. Some team had to leave, some clients had to leave because of virtual mindsets not great for everybody. So really, as we've started serving these creative people more often, we thought, okay, we like the way we serve them. They'll put up with our experimentation because we're always trying new things, trying to add new values to our clients and things like that. So they were obviously the best niche to go virtual with too, because if we get a new client referred to us from Seattle, they don't go, hey, when are you going to drive my tax return up here to Washington? They just don't care. Creative people don't really care. They just want a model. They actually don't want paper. So when we make a requirement and say you can't give us paper and we will never deliver paper to you in our firm, they like, okay, that's awesome. I'll pay more for that value. So this niche of creative people just fit nicely with our desire to move into a virtual type model of running a firm.
Very cool. Based on your experience working with creatives, you work a lot with designers and uh,
Like agencies and things like that.
agencies and all that.
Yeah. Hmm.
So what's your advice? What should an aspiring freelancer prepare for before making the jump? So let's say I'm a designer. I work for an agency, but yet I kind of feel uh, confident enough to start my own thing, my own business, maybe my own company or my own agency.
Yeah.
What are the things that are precautions? What are the things that I should prepare for before I start going in that direction?
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a lot of different things. We could talk a lot of technical things, but maybe we'll leave that to another question. But strategy wise, which is just the intentionality of running a creative business the right way, you really have to define who your customer is. You got to know who are the people you're going to serve. One way to do that is to develop a niche in who you serve. Now, creating a niche in any kind of business is really more of a mature strategy. That is, it happens after a number, 4 or 5 years. So as a freelancer beginning, you want to just take every client you can. and and I think that's okay. Just be aware that you're a generalist, and generalists don't make as much money as specialists. So be always thinking about narrowly defining who your client is. So that's a goal you always need to be understanding and thinking about, narrowly defining what industries you work for. You could do vertical markets, which is going to be, serving dentists or law firms or whatever it is. It could be horizontal type markets, and horizontal type niching is where you niche in your service. So you start limiting what you do. That is, you say we do design web, but we don't do development anymore, which is a harder thing to pass off if you're a full service agency. So you just got to really know who your client is and define them. And even if you don't know, it's still okay to define who you think you want it to be in 2 or 3 years. So just have that as a guidepost to help you as you grow. And then take everybody you can. As a freelancer, you're trying to get money. But just be focused, be intentional about where you're headed, and don't let the unintentionality of your business lead you. Make sure you lead where you're going. So, that value issue of the customer you serve is a big deal. So that's one. Can I give another one?
Yeah, absolutely. Please.
So pricing is always a big issue. If you jump out of an agency into your own freelance thing, obviously most people just bill by the hour, and it's the easiest thing to do, and it's the thing people do just automatically. But it turns out to not always be the best way to do things. It's more of a strategic thing to price, to do something called value pricing, which Caesar, we talk a lot about on the Businessology show. A lot of people do it a lot of different ways. Even Dan Mall, my co-host, does it in different ways. But all it is really sitting down with your customer, going, "What do you need? What do you value? What is it you're actually trying to achieve? And how can I place a dollar amount on that value?" And frankly, it's hard because that's a creative thing, and it's really an unknown thing. And you just have to be comfortable with the unknown of pricing your services a lot of times, because you really, if you're value pricing, you can say, all right, this website, I'm going to charge you 10 grand for it as a freelancer. You don't know if they would have paid 15, or maybe if you give them 10, that you don't know that they're going to think that's too high. Maybe they wanted to pay 5. So pricing is just a really hard thing to do. So we default to just, assigning a price or a value to our hourly rate. And that's not really best in my mind, because really the passing of an hour does not necessarily equate to value delivered to a client. You send them a bill as an accumulation of hours passed, and they're like, well, I still don't have anything for what I wanted. But, it still works in some fashion. So just so those two things are key: defining your customer and pricing your services. You're not going to get them all right at the first. I'm still messing those up. But just focus on those. Those are huge things as you move into running your own company.
Now, Jason, I'm going to take it back a little bit to the beginning. Now, I asked you, to tell us a little bit about your story, how you got started. I'm also interested in knowing how you what was the idea behind beginning a podcast that serves the generally the creative community, where you got together with Dan Mall. How did that start?
Yeah. So, yeah, that's interesting. So Dan Mall had been a client of ours, when he was formerly at Big Spaceship, another agency he was at in New York, and he started thinking about, starting his own agency, and we were working with him at that time before he started Super Friendly. And so we'd been working together for a while, and, just in working with Dan, if you're with Dan for any amount of time, he's a very strategic guy, very focused on customers, very focused on doing things in different ways. And so I had been podcasting. So I've been doing my other podcast for the other world I live in, which is the CPA world. We've been doing that for about 2.5 years now. So we've been getting, legs under us on a podcast. And so since our niche is creative businesses, it, really is a great marketing tool. and a great way to pass out that free information, which we all want to try to do through podcasting and blogs and tweets and things like that. So I approached Dan at a conference. I think it was at Circles conference, in Austin, and said, "Hey, Dan, would you want to do a podcast with me?" And he's like, "Yeah, man." I think he had been thinking about that, and so we want to bring the best of both worlds. He was obviously an agency leader and designer, and I have no clue how to run an agency or how to design anything. So, but I bring the business side too, and when we started it, I guess about a year ago, I had been coaching creative people and owners of agencies online for a number of years, with a focus on business strategy and growth. And so I thought, well, I can bring that to the table, and it worked well. We worked well together, and he said yes. I was surprised. I asked if he would do it, and he said yes. So I was pretty pumped.
What was your relationship prior to the businessology show with? What was your relationship with Dan Mall before that? Were you also? I mean, you were working with him, and you obviously helped him go off on his own and start his own company, Super Friendly. But and Dan, if you're watching this, we're not. This is the only example I can think of right now. The only direct example, right?
Right. Yeah. So
go ahead. Go ahead.
well, no, yeah, you're right. So we had been, doing a lot of, some of the technical stuff for him, like taxes and things like that. But yeah, we were doing a little coaching with Dan at the time, and when he was about ready to start Super Friendly, he knew he wanted to do it. But a coach sometimes pushes you, sometimes to do it sooner than you think you can do it, and it's always hard starting your own company. But I said, dude, let's do it. January 1st of next year, I think, is what I told him. He's like, okay, man, we're on it. And so he did it, boom, first year, got agency of the year, just blew the doors off of running an agency, and is now, in his second year and just experimenting and just totally doing new things. So it's just been a joy to serve Dan and his wife too.
Very cool. And it's an amazing show. I mean, you guys provide, I mean, you really dig deep into things that, for instance, Dan, again, we're talking about you, Dan.
Yeah.
Dan talks about his experiences and what he's dealt with as far as, everything that has to do with his clients, work, payment, even pricing, like you've mentioned. And it's just the amount of information on that show is it's incredible. Now, you mentioned earlier that designers or creative professionals should define their customer first, right? And then place a dollar amount. Is there anything that the creative professional that's about to go on their own, freelance or start their own company, anything else that they should worry about or really prepare for beforehand, as far as in terms of taxes and maybe even funding, or having maybe work lined up? I mean, what defines the person that is really ready
Yeah.
to get started?
Yeah, those are good. So maybe that'll lead us into some more of the technical setup of your business. So just we do tell freelancers and clients to really just keep it simple at first. There's no need to create complex business structures if you don't have them. So if you just jump out on your own, it's okay to do it under your name. If you want, you can be an LLC if you want to. That's not going to give you any tax benefit from working under your name to an LLC. The tax, the way you file taxes is exactly the same, so it doesn't give you tax benefit. The LLC can give you more legal limited liability, which may or may not help you. A lot of designers don't need that, but if you're working on some huge sites that are dependent on their site to be up and running every second, and that's how they do all of their sales, and you're part of the dev team or something, then you may want to be working under an LLC, because they may want to sue you if they have downtime of an hour and lost $3 million in sales, those kind of things. So, but the key is, don't create complex situations unless you have to. And then so you could do it under your name. That's how you can start. And then you could do it LLC. That's kind of a step up if you want some liability. And then a further step up from that is to become an S corporation. And again, you don't do that unless you have to. And the thing that drives the need to do that is typically when you find your profit coming in at around $80,000, $90,000 a year on an annual basis, that's when you're going to start feeling the benefits of moving to an S corporation. So that's technically, kind of how you set up the taxes and things like that. Is that kind of a good rundown of the tax side?
Yeah, and if let's say I begin doing freelance work as myself, my own name. Okay, you said that you might want to step it up to LLC at a point. Does it matter the amount of time? How much time between the time you began and let's say you have a large job? Does it matter if it's like within a year, a couple of years, 5 years?
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't really matter when you want to be the LLC. I mean, some people like to be an LLC just to have a company name, and that's not bad either. You might be working with a larger client. Maybe if you get your first larger client or something, um, and you want to, portray yourself as a little bit more of a stable company, that's not a bad idea. Maybe to move into an LLC. It's not that expensive to set up on your own. So you can do that so that people can write checks to a company name instead of your personal name. That does feel and look a little different, and maybe that's a step up, from being a freelancer to being a business owner. Just know it's not going to save you taxes by becoming an LLC, but it might be good idea for other branding purposes. Just to make yourself a stronger, more stable company name in the marketplace that you serve.
What about for those folks who have, let's say, two or three different ventures? Um, one could be your freelance design work, right? But then let's
Yeah.
say I want to start a product or start selling maybe something that I screen print, maybe T-shirts or something,
Hmm.
and it's a completely different name, right?
Yep.
And then there's also the I don't know, like some sort of joint venture with another friend, another fellow designer. Do I put it all under one roof, under one name, or are these three separate entities?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's a good question. So, yeah, a lot of people in this industry do service and products at the same time, and they're really as those two companies grow, the structures of a service based business are different than the structures of a product based business. So, when you have a different business structure, it's kind of confusing to mix them. So, if you do think freelance side, like the service related design or dev side, and the product side might grow, even just a little bit, even if it's not that substantial, it is easier to separate them. It just allows you to hire people in different ways. And as you grow, if you're looking at your financials, like, if you want to know what are your wages and subcontract costs as a percentage of your total revenue, you want to, in a service-based business, that looks different than it does in a product-based business. And in product based, a lot of people, we need to even differentiate there. Sometimes it's people selling actual products, but most of the time people mean a web app or some kind of SaaS based product that they've built and they sell on a monthly basis. So you're going to have a lot of dev on that side and a lot of support issues on a product side that you might not have as much on the service side. So you're you just have different models of how to run a business. So it makes sense to kind of keep those separate if they have different goals. One is service to a person. In the service side, you're dealing with people and pricing them, and that's an intimate issue. But on the product side, it's all about metrics. You drive a company like that on metrics a lot. You want to know, which emails, A/B testing, trying to figure out how people sign up and when, and when they do it and at what times. So you're not necessarily dealing with customer to customer kind of thing. So the structures are all different. So you typically want to separate those. And then if you ever do a joint venture with another person, um, you want to definitely do that separately too, because you don't want to give them any ownership of your current company. So you want to separate anything you do with another person in another LLC typically.
Excellent. So, Jason, a lot of designers really don't have. Well, I'm not speaking for all designers. I'm just generally speaking. Some creatives are afraid of sort of the money side of things.
Hmm.
They're good at their craft. They're good at providing the work, and they do an amazing job. However, they might not know how to charge. They may think that maybe I'm charging too much, or I'm
Yeah.
not charging enough.
Mhm.
Um, what are your suggestions on rates? You mentioned it earlier. touched it a bit. But what's your advice as far as rates, and also hourly? You talked a little bit about hourly versus a flat fee.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you
So
talk a little bit more about that?
yeah, definitely. So it, when I coach creative business owners, the one thing I know is we have to determine, I have to help them somehow figure out what they think about their own value. So when you're pricing a customer, what you're doing is you're making a statement about your value. And that's what creative people don't like to do. That is actually a very common fear that really almost all creative people experience and feel. I don't care if they're speakers or they're well known or they have larger companies. They all deal with the core issue of, am I valuable and am I this valuable? And so what the goal of a coach is to move them forward in recognizing what is value, who defines that, and how does that affect your price. So um, I always start coaching with these two things. Here's the two things I try to get out of the person I'm coaching. I'm trying to figure out what they're afraid of, because I know they're afraid of something, and that's typically, if I put this price out there where somebody think I'm that valuable, so that fear, and so a coach is meant to deal with that and open that up and figure out, where's that fear coming from? Is that innate in you? Does that come from another company you work for? Have you been burned in the past? So what are you scared of and how valuable are you? And the second one is, yeah, typically you need to double your price. and and I'm serious. And that's something, it's almost true in almost any instance I work with creative people. So I know going in, I got to somehow help them to double their price. Now, my goal is not to just shaft their client, right, and get more money out of their pocketbook. My goal is to is to increase the value of that service provider, that design professional. Because what people don't realize is when you're raising price, you really should be seeking to raise value. And price follows value. So if you're not valuable, then your price has to follow that, and your price goes down in our marketplace. But if you're highly valuable, then your price just travels and follows with that value. So my goal is to always coach and help people realize what their value is. And that's why we talk about niching, because your value doubles and triples if you narrowly define who you serve. If you're a specialist, your values automatically double what your competitors are. So your prices automatically double. So a lot of our clients are a good bit more high priced because they're always seeking to deliver high value. Um, so so doubling a price is an issue. Now, if you're doing an hourly rate, if you've got anything less than $100 an hour, I'm going to question that. I'm going to question that. If you're working with me and you're a freelancer and you're doing, websites less than $5,000, I'm going to question that. If you're a company, typically, if it's less than 25 grand, I'm going to question why you're doing it for so low. And, those questions for me are going to make you answer. I'm going to know what you believe by you say, I don't know if people will pay it. Well, I know people will pay it. That's not an issue, because I have a lot of clients I coach, and we do double their price and have doubled their value to their clients. So those are some benchmarks, maybe, 125, 150 are rates that I hear a lot of freelancers charging. And I think those would be pretty normal if you're doing hourly billing. But value pricing, then you're going to talk about a project cost, so you start talking about, getting things for 5 figures. So, we'll start moving a freelancer to more of a business owner and say, when can you move and start, charging 5 figures for everything you do? And when is it a good move to make that, to do that, and things like that. So a lot of intimate factors to consider in what you believe about yourself. Those statements are going to clearly be reflected in the price that you offer to clients. And if you don't value yourself, you'll price yourself lower. That's what happens. And that's very dangerous.
You said about 100, like 125 or so is the typical starting point for a freelancer?
Um, I don't know if it's a
Starting
starting
charge?
point. Yeah, I think some may start lower than that. But if you've been doing it a year or so, year to 3 years, then I would expect it to be up there because you figured some things out. You can kind of flow projects. Maybe you can handle 2 or 3 projects at a time. Juggling multiple projects becomes a project management issue. And if you get good at that stuff and your design is keen and looks really good, and is what is valuable to your client, then yeah, you should be up there 100, 125, an hour. And it's weird to talk about hourly because I don't coach people on that at all, and most of our clients don't do hourly. Some still do, but in a larger creative company, you're going to find tiered pricing. So the owner is going to might be $225 an hour for some kind of strategy related consulting, where some of the designers might be 75 and a project manager 95. I don't know. You're going to find different structured and tiers in more of a larger agency with 6, 7, 8, 9 people. But on your own, I've seen 100, 125, to really be pretty stable and a good starting point.
Jason, what got you into working with creative professionals? That's also, by the way, that would be a completely different show, talking about the difference between a creative and then calling someone a designer,
Yeah.
product creator,
Yeah.
whatever. So if I'm offending anyone out there by generalizing and saying creatives, I don't mean any harm.
Yeah.
How did you start working with? Here I go again. Creative
Yeah, well,
professionals.
I guess we do generalize that term. Even Dan Mall has questioned the use of that term before. It's because he's like, we're all creative, and he comes from a large agency background, and he's like, creative director, what does that mean? That person has all the creativity and nobody else does, and it kind of doesn't make sense. So I'm with you when you just call people creative professionals. That's what I do. So yeah,
It's a
yeah,
tough
no
one.
offense to anybody. So I think you'll find with any niche that you're working in. Some people say niche. I'm from the South, so
That's another one,
so I
right?
gotta say the redneck niche word. That's how I say it. But a niche a lot of times just falls out of your company. It's weird. As you grow, you're a generalist. You'll take any kind of client, and the more you serve, you'll start seeing people start referring people like themselves. And so you'll see a section of your company become kind of focused, and you'll go, "Hey, I got 5 of these people. Maybe this is something I need to be doing," like NGOs, nonprofits, governmental type people. And you start going, huh, I like this service. We tend to work well with this kind of clients. Let's kind of start steering our company towards that niche that seems to be developing in our company. And that's pretty common of how niches develop. And that's what happened to us. We got a few creative people. They started referring more and more creative people. And eventually it got to a point to where we could make a strategic decision to say, we will not serve anybody anymore unless they are within that creative field. And we do have to define that, but it could be illustrators, content developers, UI, UX type consultants, design, web, just typical marketing website agencies, dev shops, and then larger creative agencies with 10 people, things like that. Um, creative professional is a broad term. It could be speakers, just writers. I mean, so it could encompass a lot of people, email marketing, SEO, those kind of things. We have some of that stuff too. So it's still pretty broad, but at least narrows who we serve and helps us to know who to market to.
So you're also a speaker. You do a lot of speaking
Yeah, I
yourself,
do.
right?
Yeah, so I'll speak at different things. So I live in 2 worlds. I live in the CPA world. So in the CPA world, I'm always proposing doing things differently in our profession, and so I'm kind of known to disrupt some things there. And we do that with our organization Thrival at thriveal.com. So I speak for those conferences, and and I'm speaking in jeans and Converse, and the guy beside me is in a tie, and so obviously we look a little different, and so that I don't know, it upsets some people. They don't actually like it. So but
Really?
the younger people, they tend to enjoy that. So, and then I speak a little bit on the creative side too. Sometimes I just go to creative conferences and learn a lot from the speakers because I know a lot about how creative businesses run. Couldn't do the design or the development, but the business structure and strategy, pretty familiar with. So I go and just listen. Sometimes I'll go and speak. I've been to Vancouver with Dan and spoke up there at Interlink Conference, and doing another one in Boston next year at How Design Live Creative Freelancers Conference next year. So
Do you have any recommendations, any suggestions as far as software, tracking software, things that we could use when we're getting started, when we're starting our
Yeah.
creative business or company? Anything that you recommend, anything that you've used in the past or your clients have used that you're just amazed by and really works out really
Yeah, I
nicely?
mean that's a good question. So yeah, I think you want to step into a freelance with some tools. I think your business structure as a freelancer is pretty easy. So really, a main thing you want to work on is some kind of invoicing tool, and some invoicing tools come with time tracking, and that might be helpful to some people. Harvest is, I mean, it's just beautifully built. I mean, it looks so good. They've been a sponsor of ours on our podcast. So Harvest is definitely a key. FreshBooks is going to be kind of a step up and do a little more accounting for you. It also allows for invoicing. And you can let contractors in there. And then if you get larger, Zero, xero.com is a great accounting package. Also does invoicing, but does full accounting for a larger business that not everybody would need. So definitely step into some kind of robust invoicing tool that, makes you look like you know what you're doing, and Harvest will make you look good. So you don't want to be, sending, I don't know, you don't want to be,
A Word document with
yeah, you
just
don't want to send an email and go, all right, that's 5 grand. You want to act like a company, so make sure you do, and you're just going to have to pay, for a product like Harvest, I think is important.
nice. What about books? Any books that you'd recommend to an aspiring self-employed or independent creative
Oh yeah,
professional?
two reads that everybody should read, and I'll almost send these to every one of my creative clients that I coach. Is Positioning for Professionals, and that's by Tim Williams. That is an easy read, but is the basics of narrow positioning. There's some value pricing related discussion in there. Um, Very, very good book. And then Blair Enns, The Win Without Pitching Manifesto,
Oh yeah,
is
that's
a
a
really
great one.
good book. So it's a manifesto. So it's really proclamations or 12 belief statements of what we will no longer do and what we will do as creative professionals. And those are just very influential books in my life. And I just now hand them out all the time. So really good books.
Very awesome. And everyone, those books and everything we talked about today will be in the show notes under pencilversuspixel.com slash Jason Blummer. That's pencilvspixel.com slash Jason Blummer. Before we wrap it up, Jason, any exciting stuff that's going on that's going to happen anytime soon in Blummer CPAs or any speaking engagements,
Yeah,
anything
I
new?
guess a couple of things I'll mention. I can't always coach everybody one on one because I have to limit my time, and so our prices have to be a little bit higher. But we do periodically, every few years, we'll do a creative coaching course, and so it's a lot cheaper, and so you can go through an online course for about 10 months with me, and I've taken other creative professionals through it, and it's really cool to collaborate with other people. There'll be reading you got to go through that I've written, and then there's questions and homework, and you get to collaboratively answer those questions with your other team, and they get to see what you're writing, everybody in the coaching course, and then we meet live together once a month, and that's starting now. So you have to get into that real fast. So that you want to just you could fill out the contact us form at the bottom of our site at Blummer CPAs. So that's a big deal, and that's going on. And then the Businessology show kicks off with our second season coming up in February. So Dan and I are in talks right now developing what that's going to be about. The podcast is going to be a lot more focused. These seasons are really helping us to define what is this season going to be about. And so that's coming up. And so I'm pretty pumped about those two things. So things to check out.
That's a really neat way to treat a podcast or a podcast by seasons. Not many podcasters do that.
Maul
That's
saw
really
it from
cool.
somebody. He pitched it to me, and I thought, man, that's such a cool idea. It gives us the needed break we need because Dan travels and speaks probably even more than I do. So and he just had a new baby, so we all need breaks. So I thought that was a great idea, and it helps us to regroup and refocus. And so I'm excited about season 2 of the Businessology show.
Definitely. Sounds really
Yeah,
exciting. Jason, thank you so much. I've taken so many
sure.
notes. It's ridiculous. I hope everyone out there has taken very precise notes on this. I mean, this is incredible information. Thank you so much, Jason, for taking the time and hanging out with us here on Pencil versus Pixel and giving us your expertise and your knowledge about the business side of things, which is something that a lot of us need to know a little bit more about. And even though it's a changing landscape out there, the business sort of as a whole stays the same. And I think it's really essential to know this kind of
Yeah.
stuff. But
Yeah,
thank you
man.
so
Thank you
much.
so much.
Appreciate your
Yep.
time. Thanks everyone for joining in. We'll catch you in the next show. Thanks.